Well, it is good morning for me. I'm going to remove the veil of the third curtain or the third wall. Good morning. But welcome, everybody. It's GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. We are quickly approaching the finale of our book here. Things are bad. The dragon/demon soul has been unleashed, destroying the Burning Legion and the Night Elves alike. And the dragonflight's frozen. Corial straws is just about the only hope right now. All right, so let's stay a while and listen as we dive right into chapter 21. Corial straws collided with Neltharion as hard as he could, aiming for the areas least protected by scales. At the same time, the red unleashed a burst of flame toward the insane aspect's eyes. He succeeded in startling the Earth Warder, but Neltharion did not lose the disc as Corielstraws had hoped. The black dragon had a death grip on it. Even as Neltharion went rolling through the air, he kept enough presence of mind to prevent the loss of his cherished creation. Corielstraws hissed at his failure. Alone, he stood no chance against the much larger dragon. Worse, the red felt the pull of what Krasis had more rightly dubbed the demon soul, and knew that as he had done with the rest, the Earth Warder would be able to make Corielstraws, too, a slave. But still Alexstrasza's consort refused to back away. He had committed himself, and he would fight until he died, if only to perhaps save his mate. Before Neltharion could recover, Corielstrasz slammed into him again, this time driving his head into the black's torso. The aspect gasped as the air was driven from him. His jaw jerked open, and this time the disc slipped free. A blow to the solar plexus. "No!" thundered Neltharion. With a frenzied show of force, he shoved back the other dragon, sending Corielstrasz hurtling. The Earth Warder dove quickly after the piece. Wings pressed behind him. Neltharion dropped so quickly that he managed to grab the demon soul before it had fallen very far. Pulling up, the black behemoth roared in rage at the smaller beast. "How dare you!" Corielstrasz tried righting himself, but moved too slowly. To his horror, he saw Neltharion hold the disc toward him. "You will bare your neck to me." The flash of light overwhelmed Corielstrasz. It burned as nothing he had ever before experienced. It felt as if his scales melted, his bones seared. He cried out in agony, but still the red forced himself forward, not back. He fought against the pain, closing in on Neltharion. The Earth Warder bellowed his frustration. In his madness, Neltharion had sought to destroy, not enslave, and that now worked against him. They clashed. So close the soul did not prove as useful as Neltharion might have imagined. Both dragons were momentarily reduced to claws and teeth, and Corielstrasz held his own. Neltharion snapped at his throat. The red inhaled, sending a full blast of heat into the Earth Warder's face. This time the attack proved more successful. The black dragon spun back, his head smoking. But Corielstraw's victory proved short-lived. Fluttering just beyond his reach, Neltharion pressed the demon soul to its heaving chest and grinned madly at his opponent. "You are no longer amusing, young Corielstrasz. You are a gnat to me, an insect which must be squashed. Enslavement is too good for you." As he spoke, the disc glowed bright. Its golden aura spread out, encompassing Neltharion. His laughter held no more sanity. The Earth Warder's eyes blazed, and he seemed to swell out of proportion. "An insect," he replied almost merrily. "All of you, nothing but insects to me." The black dragon now shook as if almost ready to explode. He held out his free paw and pointed at the distant ground. The earth buckled. Demons and night elves scattered further from one another as volcanic eruptions began. Magma and fire shot high in the sky, raining down on those unfortunates not swift enough to escape. The very power of the earth that he had sworn to wield wisely, Neltharion now used to kill indiscriminately. Before Corielstraw's eyes, the Earth Warder perverted his role, transforming himself from an aspect of the world to its antithesis. As he committed his latest atrocities, Neltharion changed further. A rip appeared in his torso, scales torn apart as if made of paper, yet blood did not flow from the wound, but rather pure fire. Another tear formed on his chest, and a third on the opposite side of the first. So he's fully transforming into Deathwing now. As if the unleashing of a plague, horrific rips materialized all over Neltharion. The high scales on his back tore into pieces. Even to see all this caused Corielstra's pain, but the huge black seemed not to notice. If anything, Neltharion appeared to revel in what was happening to him. His eyes burned bright with power, reflecting that of the disc, and he continued to laugh as he unleashed devastation. Steeling himself, Corielstra's tried one more time to stop the hideous Leviathan. He soared toward Neltharion, already preparing for his own death. Corielstra's silently apologized to an absent Krasis who would surely die the moment that he did. Although caught up in his murderous work, Neltharion still managed to notice his adversary's return. With as close to a sneer as his reptilian visage could produce, the black dragon pointed the demon soul at Corielstra's. Its power hammered the red, thrusting him down toward the ground. Corielstra's tried to slow his descent, but the disc's power proved relentless. With an ear-shattering thud, he crashed. Even then, Neltharion would not let up. He was determined to crush the other giant into the earth. Then a crackling field of blue energy surrounded Neltharion, causing him to hiss and draw the soul back to his chest. The black behemoth roared angrily as he sought the source of his captivity. Through watery orbs, Corielstra's saw a wave of motion heading toward Neltharion. The other dragons were free. Between his battle with Alexstrasza's consort and the havoc he had unleashed on the Night Elves and demons, Neltharion had not focused enough attention on the spell holding the rest as slaves. Now that mistake gave Kalimdor hope. One group quickly detached itself from the rest. A flight of blue furies circled wildly around the caged aspect. At their head, one who had until the betrayal championed the Earth Warder's cause more than any other.
Neltharion, roared Malygos. Friend Neltharion, look what you've become. The thing that you've created will destroy you. Give it to me so that I can put an end to its corruption. No, Neltharion shouted back. You want it. You all want it. You know how powerful it can make you. It can create a god. Neltharion! But Malygos got no farther. The black dragon hissed and his body grew more fiery. The golden aura spread from both him and the disc, burning away the cage the blue had cast. You leave us no choice, old friend, Malygos hissed as he dove for the other aspect. Around them, the other blues positioned themselves to strike Neltharion from all sides with their power. Of all flights, the blues knew the intricacies of magic as none of the others. Here at last, a weak Corielstra's thought, Neltharion would fall to defeat. Like a pack of wolves closing in on the kill, the blue dragons swarmed around their foe. An aura of deep cobalt surrounded Malygos. That obscenity should never have become reality, the Spellweaver informed his counterpart, and as I've become instrumental in encouraging its creation, 'tis only fair, old friend, that I erase it. What seemed an arc of pure white flew at the disc. As it neared, it revealed that Malygos had spoken the literal truth when he said he intended to erase the demon soul. Wherever it touched, an emptiness existed, no mist, no sky. A pure white emptiness remained. The effect on the heavens proved momentary, of course, but for the sinister dark, the fate would certainly be permanent. Or rather, should have been permanent. Neither the watching Corielstra's nor any of the others would ever know whether Malygos' spell would have destroyed the soul. Before it could touch the disc, Neltharion spat. His spit became a black, blazing sphere that met the arc, but seconds before the latter would have touched his creation. A blinding series of sparks marked their collision, and then there was nothing. With a savage cry, Malygos signaled for his flight to attack. But Neltharion acted more quickly. Even before the white arc vanished, he held forth the demon soul. Instead of the glowing light that had decimated so much of the land below, a gray one shot forth in every direction. Malygos created a shield of smoke, but plain smoke it might as well have been. The gray light caught him, threw him back hard. He sailed over the hills, over the horizon, roaring in agony all the way. Oh, so that maybe this is why he goes mad, because he blames himself for what happened? Maybe that's part of his madness? For his consorts and followers, however, the fate that Neltharion had in mind was much more horrific. As one, the dragons shriveled. They deflated like draining water sacks. Their cries were terrible to behold. Though they struggled, none could escape the grasping gray illumination. The other dragons sought to come to their rescue, but it was already too late. Reduced to dry husks, their magic and their life force drained by the demon soul, the dying blue dragons faded at last to dust that scattered in the wind. No, gasped Corielstra's, trying to rise up. His head spun and he collapsed again, shattering what was left of the hillside he had landed upon. No! So that's why the blue dragon's flight is pretty much out of commission for the foreseeable future. They were wiped out right here. Fools, rumbled the Earth Warder without the least bit of regret for what he had just done. You have been warned time and time again. I am supreme. All that is belongs to me. All that lives because I allow it.
And with but a glance their direction, the fiery behemoth sent a hurricane wind that tossed about the other dragons as if they were nothing. Even Alexstrasza and Ysera could not stand against it, the two other aspects blown back as easily as the rest. Along with the others, they tumbled far, far out of sight, all the while spinning haplessly. Not one dragon out of hundreds escaped Neltharion's spell. His body swollen out of all proportion, blazing rips covering his torso, the monstrous dragon turned to again survey the night elves and their foes.
And you have not learned yet. You will.
He laughed again, his free forepaw clutching at one of the tears in his hide. For the first time he seemed to notice the terrible changes wrought upon his form, and his expression shifted momentarily to one of awe. Then to the onlookers below, Neltharion shouted,
We will see who is worthy of my world. I leave you to your little war. You may fight to see who will be permitted to live and worship me.
With one last insane laugh, the black behemoth turned and flew away. Corilstraz gave thanks that the Earth Warder had not been able to continue on his mad path of destruction, but knew that the reprieve was only temporary. While he had gloried in the transformation wrought by the disc, Neltharion had finally realized that something had to be done about the forces ripping his body asunder. The weakened Red had every confidence that the Black would soon enough find a solution, and then Neltharion would no doubt return to claim his world. That's when he's going to become Deathwing and bolt himself together. Again, Corilstraz tried to rise, but his body still would not obey him. He gazed up hopefully at the murky heavens, but of his people, of his Alexstrasza, the injured Red saw no sign. A fear coursed through him, the fear that they had suffered a fate akin to that of Malygos's flight. Imagining his queen limp and lifeless atop some harsh mountain, a sizzling tear slipped from his eye. Yet try as he might, even such images failed to enable Corilstraz to rise.
Rest. I must rest. I will find Krasis, then he will know what to do.
The Red Giant let his head fall back. All he needed was a few minutes, then he could take to the air again. But it was at that moment that a new and harsh sound assailed his sharp hearing. It took Corilstraz only a second to recognize it. The sound of battle. The demons were attacking again. A nightmare. Krasis found himself in the midst of a terrible nightmare. He and Malfurion had reached a point that, while it had not given them a view of the battle, it had at least allowed the pair to witness what took place up in the sky. And so Krasis had watched as his kind fell to one insane creature. He had seen his younger self bravely, if foolishly, attempting to confront an aspect. The struggle had gone as the mage had expected, even though his memories of the time were all but gone. A chill had coursed through him when Corilstraz had finally fallen, but although Krasis felt his pain, he also felt that the Red lived. A minor victory at this point. But worse to him, worse even than the knowledge that so many Night Elves had perished at Neltharion's hand, was what had happened to the other dragons. With Malygos's flight virtually decimated, now the Spellweaver would begin to slip into his own madness as his kind became all but extinct. Gone would be the merry giant, and in his place would loom the ominous reclusive beast. And beyond that, the attack that had sent all the others tumbling far over the horizon rattled Krasis to his core. He kept telling himself that Alexstrasza would be all right, that most of the dragons would survive the epic winds that threw them half a world away. History told him so, but his heart kept insisting otherwise. He tore ahead of Malfurion, trying in desperation to transform. He was older, wiser, and more skilled than his younger self. Krasis could have taken on Neltharion with better hope of success. The Dragon Mage struggled to change, to become what he should be. In the end, however, he only succeeded in first stumbling, then falling. Krasis dropped face first into the earth where he lay for a moment, all of his failures rising up to overwhelm him.
Master Krasis,
Malfurion lifted him up. Ashamed of his display, the mage buried his emotions under the mask he generally wore.
I'm fine, Druid.
The young night elf nodded.
I understand some of what you're going through.
Krasis almost snapped that the druid could not possibly understand, but realized almost immediately how harsh and stupid and such a caustic remark would have been. Of course Malfurion understood. At this very moment his people, possibly those he cared for, were dying. Suddenly his companion looked up.
Praise Cenarius, we're in luck.
Luck? Following his gaze, Krasis spied a welcome sight. Tyrande rode toward them, two other sisters accompanying her. She also led along a pair of extra mounts, obviously for the two spellcasters. Pulling up, she leapt from the Nightsaber and hugged Malfurion without any sense of shame. The other sisters politely looked down, Krasis noting that they seemed very respectful of Tyrande, despite clearly being elder. "Thank the Mother Moon," she gasped. "With all that happened, and Corilstraz appearing like that, I feared that you—"
"As did I you,"
the druid replied. Krasis felt a slight ache in his heart that had nothing to do with either his or Corielstra's condition. In the place of the two night elves, he imagined himself in another, but that would never come to pass unless they stopped both the Burning Legion and Neltharion.
We must move on, he told them. We must stop the demons if we have even a hope of stopping the Earth Warder.
With some reluctance, Malfurion and Tyrande separated. When everyone had mounted, the band turned back, heading toward the site of the struggle. They heard the cries and shouts long before they saw the first bloodshed. The battle had shifted position entirely, even surprising Tyrande and the sisters who had just left it.
It should not be this close, blurted one of the latter. The lines are collapsing completely.
The others nodded, then turned to Tyrande.
Mistress, we need to find another path. The one we took is overrun.
Both Kratos and Malfurion noted the term used, but neither understood what it meant. Tyrande added to the mystery by accepting the suggestion in a manner befitting one in command. Lead on where you think best. They rode on, seeking another way to the host. A path opened up before them, but it brought the group precariously near the fighting. Still, it seemed their only route left unless they wanted to ride completely behind Ravencrest's army, which would add wasted hours to their trek. As the party rode, Krasus eyed the battle nearby. The demons fought as if they still intended to take the world for their lord, when they were, in fact, as likely to be wiped out by Neltharion as the Night Elves. Archimon could only be assuming that he would somehow gain the upper hand quickly, and then take on the Black Dragon. How he hoped to accomplish that, Krasus could not determine, but he put nothing past the demon commander. The future was no longer assured. Anything could happen.
Down this way,
called the priestess in the lead. She steered her mount around a descending trail, then vanished briefly around the edge of a hill that they had been skirting. The others followed suit, aware that each second counted, but as they came around the hill, Malfurion shouted,
"Look out!"
Coming seemingly out of nowhere, the battle flowed into them. Desperate soldiers fell back as grinning demons chopped into their weakening lines. The riders just barely missed colliding with the former. Worse, the fluidity of the line brought them face to face with the enemy. The sister in the lead tried to deflect the burning blade of a demon, but she moved too slowly. The monstrous sword ripped through her shoulder and neck, and she dropped like a stone. Her mount tore into the demon immediately after the attack, but there was nothing that could be done for her.
"Mistress!" the remaining sister shouted. "Get back!"
She shared blows with the Felguard, beating him away from Tyrande. Malfurion's childhood friend did not shirk from the battle, though. With a fierceness that reminded Krasus of one of his own, she came to her companion's aid, driving her blade under the demon's armor. The Felguard crumbled, and briefly the defender's line reformed.
"We need to reach Ronan and Lord Ravencrest,"
Krasus urged. Yet despite their best efforts, they found themselves pushed back by the sea of bodies. Krasus cast a spell that sent the fallen weapons of other demons flying into those monstrous warriors in the forefront. Beset by both the Night Elves and the enchanted blades, many demons died. The effort pushed Krasus more than he had expected. Again, Corielstra's weakness affected him too. His younger self had expended himself against Neltharion, and the link between the two had evidently even let him draw from Krasus. Malfurion proved more effective. He whipped up a dust storm that blinded only the Burning Legion, forcing the demons to swing recklessly in the hopes of finding some target. Soldiers picked off the confused warriors with ease. Focused on the encroaching invaders, Krasus paid no attention to the sky. Thanks to Neltharion, he saw no reason why anyone would need to look up anymore. But when he heard the screaming sound and noted the growing shadow, Krasus finally did look up just in time to curse his failing. The two infernals struck, and chaos overwhelmed all. The hurtling demons hit the ground with devastating results. A tremendous quake overwhelmed everyone. Soldiers were sent flying. Others screamed as huge chunks of stone and earth tossed up by the infernals landing crushed them. Tyrande's mount was struck by one such missile and fell, tossing the priestess into the fray. The other sister reached for her, but a fiery blade caught her through the heart. Malfurion too attempted to grab Tyrande, but one of the infernals rose from the pit it created and barreled into his lightsaber. He received no aid from Krasus. The dragon mage hung half-conscious in the saddle, the side of his head bruised by what must have been a huge rock. Worse, Krasus' mount, panicked by the tremors, ran off with the stricken figure. The druid finally leapt from his lightsaber. The infernal ran past him, the brutish demon interested only in general carnage. Fighting through the mob of disheartened soldiers, Malfurion caught sight of Tyrande. One hand pressed against her head, she half knelt in the mayhem. Her helmet lay at her feet, one part severely dented. The druid marveled that she was alive.
"Tyrande,"
he cried, stretching a hand out to her. She stared blankly at it a moment before taking it. Malfurion dragged her back from the worst of the fighting. With Tyrande leaning on him, the druid headed for somewhere to momentarily hide. All he cared about was getting her away from this area. Malfurion felt guilty for having asked her to come, even though there was likely no part of the battle where anyone could be considered safe. He half-dragged her up the hillside. Even up here it was not so safe, for night elves and demons already fought at the base. At the moment, however, it was the only possible choice. A few green plants still hung on to life on the hill. The druid touched one and begged of the plant its moisture. He brought the green leaves to Taranda's lips, letting precious water drip into her mouth. She moaned. He readjusted her position, letting her head rest in the crook of his arm.
Easy, Taranda. Easy.
Malfurion. The others.
They're all right, he lied. Take a minute to clear your head. You struck it when you fell.
Jara, it went right through her.
Malfurion quietly swore. If she recalled the one sister's death, then she would soon recall too much more.
Try to relax.
But even as he asked that of her, Malfurion himself tensed. He felt certain that someone watched him. Quickly peering behind him, the druid thought that he caught sight of a shadow. One hand immediately twisted into a fist. Had one of the attackers slipped through?
Taranda, he whispered, I'm going to talk to Krasis. He's not far. You rest more.
She gazed at him with an expression that indicated she found something wrong with what he said, but could not identify just what. Hoping that her mind would not clear too quickly and make her remember that the mage had become separated from them, Malfurion gently let her rest against the hill, then slipped away. As he cautiously wended his way toward where he thought he had seen the shadow, the druid focused on spells utilizing what existed around him. The land here would be only too eager to aid him if he sought to destroy a Felguard or other demon. Someone or something had been here. He saw a slight depression in one area, but it was smaller than he would have imagined from one of the fearsome warriors. The print indicated either a very short figure or some animal, though he could not say which. There also seemed to have been more than one creature. Pushing past a tree, he halted. Was it the goblins? Already came the sound of something scraping against rock. Malfurion rushed ahead, already prepared. Oh, it's Chandras, already prepared to attack. However, as he came around another tree, he saw not a demon, but a slighter, more familiar figure, another night elf. She scrambled out of sight, slipping away too fast for him to follow without leaving Taranda dangerously alone. The young female had not been wearing armor or robes of the temple, but rather garments such as many of the refugees wore. In one hand she had been carrying something long and wooden, but his brief glimpse had not given him enough of an image to guess just what. It was not so surprising to find a refugee wandering about. The ordinary people were now likely scattering in fear. The host was being decisively beaten back, and nothing seemed capable of saving the night elves this time. Malfurion turned and hurried back toward where he had left Taranda. She was all that mattered to him now. He could do nothing for any young refugee who had gotten so far from the rest. The druid scrambled among the trees, eyes already searching for Taranda. Malfurion had wasted precious time chasing after the young figure. He had to come to get Taranda and himself away from here quickly before the fight rose to where she lay. As he came around the last of the trees, Malfurion gave a sigh of relief. The sounds of combat were still some distance away. Taranda would be safe. He stopped dead as he came upon the prone figure of his childhood friend, and an ominous figure hovering over her. It should have been impossible for the creature to hear him, but it turned to Malfurion nonetheless. Hooves kicked at the rocky earth as the goat-like figure confronted him. The upper half resembled one of his own kind, save for the wicked horns curling high above. The night elven face leered at the druid as the newcomer's taloned fingers stretched in anticipation. But what was most terrible, even more so than finding this creature looming above Taranda, was the fiend's face. Malfurion knew that face. He had told no one, but it haunted his dreams. Even though there were some changes in the features, he could never have forgotten the eyes. The black and crimson crystal eyes. Lord Xavius had risen from the dead. Okay, so we have the nearly full transformation of Neltharion into Deathwing. He's got a few things to bolt on, and I'm pretty sure that's going to take him out of the fight, because he doesn't get that under control until Cataclysm. So it's going to take him a long time. You could even argue possibly thousands of years. This has probably weakened the flights. The blue flight's gone. Destroyed, essentially. They're going to slowly rebuild, but Malygos is going to have been driven insane at this point. The other flights are basically whittled down to nothing. So there's more to come on that. I don't know if we're going to get into it in this book or the third, but that could be a whole storyline in itself, and they should devote it to such if they really wanted. It's good that he knows Xavius is back, so the satyrs are going to come into play now. One of the possibilities I thought is that Taranda might get abducted, and that could help drive Illidan to join the dark side, so to speak. We'll see. I don't fully remember or even know if that's truly covered in the storyline. But like we said before, this is considered canon. All right, another episode in the Pipes 5x5. Thank you, my listeners, as always, for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.